If an opening is easy for a beginner to understand, it's a good choice. If it's too complex, it's probably not the right one for them. In this video, we'll check out how well the French defense works for beginners playing with the black pieces. First off, e6 feels a bit weak, since it only moves one square while white's pawn moves two. It looks like white is already ahead with more space. This is just a first impression, but believe me, beginners playing as black might not like it. Of course, the idea is to strike with the d5 on the next move, which is pretty clever and involves a two-move plan. For a complete beginner, that's quite a big deal. It also works well for covering the classic f7 weakness, if white makes the common beginner mistake playing bishop c4. That bishop is just begging to be hit by the pawn. So far this looks great for black, and for a player who is completely new to chess, playing e6 would even be okay. But after d4 and d5, our beginner level students should be able to explain the purpose of this central strike. So, why is it important? If the student cannot answer this question, the French defense probably isn't the right opening for them, at least not yet. So black's achievements include advancing a pawn to the 5th rank, gaining some space, and challenging white's central pawn, meaning that white cannot develop as they'd like until they address the threat to e4. For now, at least, black gains the initiative. However, if the term initiative is unfamiliar to our beginner level student, it might seem like just another abstract chess concept. Therefore, from their perspective, the main benefits of playing d5 are just gaining some space and fighting for the center. Even the terms space and space advantage might not be very clear to a beginner player. White advances the e-pawn. Now black might start to wonder what they have done and is there any room to develop. Because they know that they should begin developing their pieces after moving one or two pawns to control the center. Correct answer, of course, is c5, which gains space and, more importantly, aims to immediately challenge white's central advantage. There is no time to develop slowly here. Attacking the center is actually a top priority. However, the key question is this concept known or easy to understand for a beginner level player? Of course, my answer is no. But let's consult the database of players with around 1,000 rating points and see what it reveals. Out of 2.5 million games, black played c5 in 40% of them. But the second most popular move is knight c6, 28% of the games, which goes against the whole point of the French defense. We cannot challenge white's central pawns effectively until this knight moves again and frees the c-pawn, which is unlikely since the knight has just been developed to c6. The fourth most common move by black is bishop b4 check, which actually helps white create an even better pawn structure. Finally, the fifth, with almost 100,000 beginners standing behind it, is c6, which makes no sense at all. All this clearly shows, at least to me, how tough and out of reach this opening is for beginners. Of course, they can learn to play moves they don't fully understand, but that's not the kind of chess you want to play, because eventually you'll be out of book and won't have a clue about what you're facing on the board. But let's assume they know that in the French defense, black should attack the base of white's pawn chain, the d4 pawn, with their pawn, not with their knight first. For white, this is intuitive play. They'll easily find the best move to connect their pawns, Black continues to apply pressure on d4 with their knight, while white develops with knight f3, adding a defender to d4 and moving towards the center. Here, a beginner faces a conflict between two different concepts. On one hand, they're advised to continue attacking the d4 pawn, while on the other hand, they're told not to bring the queen into play too soon. In this situation, their coach should explain why involving the queen is acceptable here, while it's generally not advisable in most of other cases. The coach's arguments should be clear and logical, but it's understandable if beginners struggle with these nuances. Otherwise, they wouldn't be beginners. If we go back to move 3, when white could have played knight c3, things can get even more complicated. For instance, what should be done with the d5 pawn? And should we develop knights before bishops, as the guidelines suggest? There are simply too many concepts involved, making it really unrealistic for a beginner to fully understand and play this effectively. Let me show you another interesting finding from the same database of players around 1,000 rating points. Black plays bishop b4 here, and although white often blunders the e4 pawn, we'll continue with the best move, e5. The most common move by far is the poor bishop takes c3. Instead of waiting for white to play a3 first, black simply gives away their better bishop without any reason. There's no logic to this move, nor any understanding of how crucial this bishop is for controlling dark squares in black's camp. And as a result, of course, black is immediately worse. It's better for beginners to play moves that come naturally to them and that they, of course, understand, rather than following the French defense's first two moves, ending up with problems like a lack of space, weak dark squares, or a vulnerable king. Let me know what you think in the comments.